Because what you're doing here is happening all over the country. As you know, I've done a good bit of traveling trying to help elect a new Senate and help put together a new Republican Party that keeps its promises, does what it says once it gets into office. I know you're frustrated like I've been, but for way too long, the Washington establishment, the political bosses, picked our candidates and told us who was going to represent us in our primaries. And then once they got to Washington, they just fell in the fold, split up the money, and all took home the bacon, and they sold our country down the drain. For years, all of us felt helpless that we really couldn't change things. Maybe here in South Carolina, where we're a little smarter than the other states, but all over the country, they seem to keep sending people who just spent money and borrowed money in order to get themselves reelected. But something started to change a few years ago. People decided enough was enough, that they weren't going to take it anymore. So I decided to do what you're doing. Rock the boat a little bit. Change things. And you know what? My party wanted Arlen Specter to stay in the Senate, but there was a young man named Pat Toomey who I knew would stand for our principles, and I stood with him. And the people of Pennsylvania, the people here in South Carolina and all over the country got behind him through this Senate Conservatives Fund. Folks, this was just a website that I put up and said I'm only going to support true conservative candidates. And I put Pat Toomey on that website, and the dollars started coming in. The average contribution was $45. But before the end of this, we had raised him nearly $1 million. Down in Florida, our party decided they wanted Governor Charlie Crist as the next senator. We found out how loyal he is to our principles. He's speaking at the Democratic convention, for heaven's sakes. But there was a little-known young man that you may have seen lately named Marco Rubio. Marco understands the promise of America, and he can speak passionately about freedom and what it's meant to his family. But he had no chance of winning. The party wouldn't support him. But the people of Florida did. The people of South Carolina did. And before it was all over, they had raised him more than $1 million. And he won that race overwhelmingly and chased Charlie Crist out of the party. Now, Kentucky was a little even more rocking the boat because my own Republican leader was supporting someone else in his home state. But the people were looking at a young man named Rand Paul in Kentucky. I was told Rand Paul couldn't win the primary, and if he did, he couldn't win the general. But the people decided differently, and he won overwhelmingly, and he's a real national leader already. Folks, we saw the same thing in Utah with Mike Lee. In Wisconsin, a Republican conservative couldn't possibly win, and Ron Johnson won, and he's a great new leader. What I'm trying to tell you is this country is in your hands, and we've demonstrated it all over the country. But folks, we've raised over $10 million already to the Senate Conservatives Fund, this time for those candidates. We invested more than $2 million in Texas to help Ted Cruz overcome incredible odds. But these aren't big donors. The average contribution is still $50 or less. People will send me $10 with a little email, and I'll send a little more after my next paycheck. If you're looking for ways that you can help around the country, you can go to senateconservatives.com, and no gift's too small, none's too large, but there are about 10 candidates on there that could make a difference in the Senate. I believe we've got a good chance to win the majority and remove Harry Reid from the majority party. But this time, it's not going to be enough just to have a Republican majority. We're going to have a conservative majority, and we're going to keep our promises. You can be part of phone banks, calling for candidates all over the country. You can help change things.
God gave us this great land.